Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. Another Meet the Gurus. As many of you know, we're all dedicated to technology, business, and entrepreneurship and how these fields have powerfully converged. Today, we are pleased to have Dana Sather Robinson here as a guru of many sorts. Thank you very much, Dana.
Thanks, Paul. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, this is a really great topic, and we already have found lots of people are watching this because it's the topic on pitching. And so, before we get into the topic, I'd like to know how did you get into the business of coaching, advising people and companies on how to do presentations and all the things that you do.
Well, that's a great question. I became a pitch coach and out of an evolution of my experience as a presentation skills trainer and my interest in angel investing. I had been living in Hong Kong many years ago and was working with a training company. So I was working as a trainer of presentation skills, selling skills, and communication skills. And I learned in that process of training people from different countries and in different backgrounds that there's certain communication principles and tools that work in any situation, in any culture. And it's just important to adapt them for that situation or the features. And that's been very helpful as I became a pitch coach. I was meeting entrepreneurs who really needed some help with their pitch. So I could use the same principles but adapt them because the pitching process is very unique. It's kind of its own format, if you will, compared to any other industry or any other process. So everything needed to be adapted, but the tools still work. So it's been fun creating this as I've gone.
Yeah, and so in terms of pitching, to me, the concept applies to many things. And sometimes, if some people would think that the word pitching even sounds too salesy, it sounds like you're trying to convince someone of something. What can you broadly define what is pitching more than that? I mean, tell us about some of the myths of pitching and what people think that it is and what it's not, from your point of view.
Well, I think it's important that people think of pitching as the beginning of a conversation. It's the start of a relationship because nobody's going to make a decision on the first pitch, whether you're pitching for a new client or pitching to investors. It's really to convey the big ideas, convey who you are so that they can decide if they want to learn more. So I like to think of pitching as it's your first date, really. It's the getting to know you phase. But it's important when in pitching to always come in the right mindset, and that makes all the difference. So it's kind of a myth, actually, that people think when I pitch, it's all about me. It's all about my business. But really, the pitch should always be about your listeners. It's not technically about them. You're talking about yourself, but whatever you say in your content as you prepare for it, it should be tailored to what your listeners want to hear. And that way, you're more likely to be remembered.
So how do you
That's
know
really
with
the
it?
first one, is that to think of it as I need to make sure that what they don't want to hear is what I'm going to talk about. And then we can dig into the details at the next meeting.
So a while ago, I read a book on interviewing, and one of the two things they say on the first page is that they say, "I'm going to tell you everything about you to know on the first page, which is prepare and listen." Right. So let's, in terms of understanding your audience, that's, I imagine, part of the preparation phase.
Yes, yes. In the preparation, it's very important to do the research and find out who you're talking to, what interests them, what their criteria is, what their mission is. And that's the most important step, actually, is when you're trying to find people to pitch to, is to make sure that your missions align. There's no point wasting your time talking to groups that are never going to invest in you or never going to buy from you if you're not a fit. So it's important to do that preparation, the homework on who the investor is, and the preparation to make sure that you give them the information that they want to hear.
Yeah, and in the case of, let's say, you're a product manager or a developer, and you've got this great new idea on something that you think could be game changing or just fundamentally valuable to your constituents, whether it's your customers or some internal partners or whomever it might be, it's pretty important to know exactly who your audience is. Like, what is your boss or what are your peers expecting to hear? What will be shocking to them, right? I mean, so you have to sort of have this whole thing in a context of, what makes sense, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And
And yeah, so whatever the situation is that preparation is key to make sure that you've done your homework on who you're talking to and that you are able to then answer your questions. You've got your idea well thought out so that you are prepared for the discussion, for the questions, for the next meeting as well.
so talk a little about that, because that is the preparation, that is the process of getting ready. I mean, I guess in investors you can Google them or Bing them. No one's using that term anymore. Some big company's been dominating the market in search. So you can do some sort of research. Presumably, you could ask colleagues in same thing. And if it's a business idea, you can bounce. So talk about the preparation process for a pitch. Again, I want to think of pitching. I think of pitching broadly as communicating well, but how would you think of, what kind of other prep would you do to, what's the process of getting yourself ready for that presentation or pitch?
The first step in the process, and I tell this for everybody, whether it's a presentation or a pitch, is to brainstorm first. Um, Templates on creating a pitch are helpful for later on, but really there's no point in trying to fill in slides and fill in a template until you know what you want to say. So the brainstorming part includes some research. So I like to tell people to brainstorm on several topics. Start with the problem you're solving, the solutions you have, what your product does, what the benefits are to your customers, and also brainstorm on who your listeners are, whether it's your ideal investors or the people that are going to be in the room. And why should they be interested in what you have to say? So, and this isn't going to take 10 minutes. This might take a few hours to brainstorm in columns on all of those different topics. And then as you're condensing your ideas into perhaps one or two sentences on what problem you're solving, one or two sentences on your solution, explain your ideal listeners, investors, or participants, and then really hone in on why should they be interested in what I have to say. I like to ask people if the people that are in the room, a few days later, somebody's asking them about that pitch. And they say, so how was Paul's pitch? And they say, oh, it was fantastic. Oh, well, what did he say? Right? They're not going to regurgitate 10 minutes of a pitch, right? They are just going to say two or three things that stood out to them. So if they remember two or three things from your pitch, what do you want it to be? Those are the areas to hone in on and make really clear at the beginning of the pitch and to reinforce throughout the pitch so that it's memorable for all the right reasons.
One of the things I think you and I... Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because that's the most important part is to remember. You want to be remembered.
Right.
A week later when people are making decisions on who to meet with again.
Right.
And having those couple really key ideas memorable will make all the difference.
One of the things you said in one of our prior discussions is about never try to communicate more than three issues, 3 points. And I hark back to, many years after Steve Jobs ever did his presentation on the iPhone, where he said, it's a communicator, it's a widescreen nano or iPod, it's a phone. And he repeated that over and over again. And then the crowd was building in cheers because obviously what he was saying, it was one thing, the iPhone. So what and I think that was invaluable when you coached me on that, to really be able to say things like, it's this, and it's this. And to your point, that takeaway later on to the consumer of that, to the recipient of that was, wow. So what did Dana tell me? She told me this, she told me this, and she told me that.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least they'll remember why they like you.
Right. Oh,
right?
interesting.
Or
That's
why they don't, but at least they'll remember as opposed to being a blur of information.
right.
Because, and often the biggest mistake that I see that entrepreneurs make when they're pitching, or in fact, anyone when they're pitching or presenting, is they have what I call TMI. They have too much information in
Mm-hmm.
their pitch
Mm-hmm.
because they're so excited, right? We're
Right.
experts in our field. You're an
Right.
expert. You know way more than you can tell me in 10 minutes.
Right.
And you don't want me to cram in everything I know about pitching and presenting in this half hour.
Right.
Um, because if we give too much information, it goes
Mm-hmm.
by in a blur.
Right.
If I give you a list of 10 things to remember, you might remember what, two or
Right.
three, maybe if you're lucky. But if I make three really clear, then I know that that's what you'll remember.
It's funny you mentioned likability. And that's something that whenever we work with instructors from anywhere in the world, we always describe one hand as being the expertise, the super domain knowledge, the real capability in teaching, facilitating, communicating, whatever you want to call it. And then the second thing is being sweethearts. That is to say, easy to work with, collaborative. And so, and I personally think they're absolutely equal because we've worked with world-class experts who made the whole process for us and for the students kind of, more like a fest where were trying to, he was trying to, or she was trying to impress someone. So I think that issue of likability, I think it's probably very under underappreciated. Would you agree about that?
I absolutely agree, and that's the second biggest mindset when going into a pitch or presentation is to be authentic, because people like to see your personality and your passion and what makes you tick. I mean, the golden rule of business is that people like to do business with people they like. And even if they may not be the best bid out there, they still prefer to do business with people that they like because they're more likely to trust someone that they like and believe what they say and listen to what they say and therefore be remembered if they're paying attention. So being authentic is important, and it's equal. So
Yeah.
you need to. This is where the presentation skills part comes
Mm-hmm.
in. I think it's just as important to practice the delivery part and to sound conversational and
Mm-hmm.
to work on all of the tools in the delivery and the presenting side of it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just about content. Investors don't invest in pitch decks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
People don't invest in an idea
Right.
just because of the deck. They invest in people that they like, that show passion and commitment.
I also think that one of the things you've told me in the past about tone, the voice tone, and the way you say something. Now it's funny. I probably exaggerate, and I'm not probably very good, perfect at it, for sure. But when you want to make a point, I am going to, and you've coached me on things such as stopping for a second, which is very hard to do for most people, particularly for a New Yorker who talks a lot. It's
For
really
a lot of
hard to
people.
hold
Yeah.
yourself back when your head may be spinning with ideas and you want to say, as you just said, I want to show you, I want to tell you, look how great this is, da da da. But there's this thing that I have to learn, we have to learn to sort of take ourselves out of the situation, right? And really appreciate that it's not this product that someone wants, it's you. It's the relationship with you. You are going to be the one who makes this idea you have successful, whether it's a business, whether it's a product, whether it's a feature function, or whatever it might well be. And I think that's
Exactly.
probably for the job also. If someone wants to get a job, you're pitching for a job, right? You're not, I mean, surely someone who, let's say you want to work for Amazon or Microsoft or whomever, certainly they need your technical skills. But if they don't like you, if you are not listening, so the likability part of that is so essential. And I mean, I don't know what else to say except for that seems to be quite obvious.
Yeah, well, it's not always so obvious because people are very focused on the content. They're nervous about their content, they're nervous about their slides. So that's the part that people tend to practice and spend their time preparing. But it is very important to practice the delivery and to work on the skills. Because pitching and presenting is a skill, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
if you and I decided to go take
Absolutely.
golf lessons or play golf, you discover I'm not very good at golf, but
Mm-hmm.
I have fun and I have a laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we went and got a pro to coach us
Sure.
every weekend for a few months, we might get pretty good at it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same with pitching. Is it takes practice
Yeah.
and it takes lots of feedback, and it might take getting some coaching, because there's a lot of skills that build on each other. You can't
Yep.
just go in and get it right the first time. As you talked about, the pause, controlling your pace. That's very important. And there's some great techniques to use to control pace, even if you're nervous, because people get nervous when they're in front of a group of people, whether it's on Zoom or in person. And the thing that nerves um, affect is our sense of timing, right? It's that adrenaline, and we feel like we should go faster.
Right.
But if you know, oh, Dana said I need to take a breath and pause here,
Right.
you can control that. So it takes a lot of practice. So I
Yeah.
always tell people, when you think you've got it down, keep practicing,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes a lot of practice to look natural when you're
Yeah.
nervous.
Yeah, and I've read about this, and as I said, you've coached me on this, but the idea of preparation is just so understated. So, and the example of this book that I read about preparation is that this fellow had interviewed all sorts of people, from Leonard Bernstein musically to Frank Zappa to, movie stars. And as long as he, in this case, he or she, you would know about the subject, you can always fall back into your memory. I mean, even if you're nervous, if you can't, if you take a deep breath and you think, and I'm looking at you and I'm listening to you, and my attention is on you, not on my nervousness, then I'm going to be able to really understand and watch you. Are you listening? Am I losing you? Are you kind of looking off into the distance, right? So the observation of your audience is as much the pitch as the, would you say? I mean, how do you read the audience? I guess maybe that's a whole different class. But reading the audience and pitching, how are they related?
They're very related. It's important, and this does take some practice. But the mentality of it is that we want it to feel like a conversation, because in a conversation is how we are most used to listening to people, right? If you and I go out for coffee, it's easy to talk. It's a two-way conversation. We both feel like we're being heard, and we remember what we say, what the other one says. So that's easy to listen to. So we want, when we're pitching or presenting, we want it to sound like that same pace as a conversation, because that's what our ears are used to listening to. And that requires some practice, particularly if you're going to be nervous. And it requires being aware, I always tell people, watch for the nods. If you say something and you wait and you're looking and they all go, mm-hmm, kind of like if you and I were having coffee and I'm telling you a story, you would nod.
Right.
And I say, look at the crowd. If their
Right.
eyes are glazed over and they're lining up to get coffee in the back,
Mm-hmm.
it's not working.
It's very funny. It's actually quite interesting that you say this, because just the other day I was watching one of the news stations, I won't say which, and now that everyone's Zooming or everyone's remote in from WebEx or whatever, there's the talking head and there was two or three other people, and the talking head was talking, and I was just watching the reactions of the other three people. Now, often these talking heads kind of either have queued them up, but it was interesting how you'd even see in their gentle nods of their head, or this kind of the lips, the way their lips changed. It was absolutely, you knew who, number one, I thought you knew who was going to speak next. And I do not believe that was cued. I believe that it was the person was completely connecting with the speaker on a level
Mm-hmm.
that was visceral, was visceral and visible. And I think that's another thing that you're talking about is your audience is a sounding board, right? Your audience is a sounding board. It's sort of helping you to, if you're prepared, to go in a different direction, right?
Yes, or at least control the pace, right? If you're watching your audience and they're all confused, then you need to rephrase what you just said, or slow down. Mm-hmm. If they're all like, then they're with you. You can keep going at that same pace. So it is important to watch for feedback, or occasionally just kind of stop, make sure that they're with you. But that's also part of the preparation, is that you have some flexibility in your notes.
Mm-hmm.
So after the brainstorming, I tell people to make an outline because the outline can be flexible, right? You've got this outline that you can use for a 10-minute pitch, or you can use the beginning of it for a 3-minute pitch,
Mm-hmm.
where you can't adapt slides that quickly, but you can look at your outline and go, okay, this is my outline. The most important information for this group is this, this, and this.
Right.
That's what I'll talk about. But you have all that information prepared so that if they dig in and ask questions on that area, you know it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you were trying to just motor through and go really fast through it, there's not that time for the conversation.
And knowing your subject, I mean, obviously, as anyone who's seen any of these Shark Tank or other Dragon's Den or whatever country you're from, you're going to be differently inclined, and some of them are nicer and some of them are less nice. But the bottom line is anyone who is, in that case, an investor or your boss, they usually have a very short attention span. So they may just say, got it, now tell me about this. So they may jump, so essentially 5 slides ahead or conceptually, and you may or may not decide to change the slides, but you need to know the material, right? You really
Exactly.
need to know your material. And in financial terms, in business terms, in business terms, everything ultimately comes down to some numbers, some form of numbers. Hits on your website, processing power of your servers or your code, how fast it runs, et cetera, et cetera. You really need to know the numbers. So and that's always, you see these shows where people are completely cut down, and everyone realizes that they were cut down, because they didn't understand the numbers and they didn't understand their business.
Right. And when people are conveying numbers, it's also important in that preparation to be clear on what's the message behind those numbers.
Yes.
Putting up a spreadsheet isn't helpful at all because we don't know what we're looking for. So I say, save those for afterwards, for the handouts, or to send later. What's important is that if this is in understanding your audience, if they want to know, your revenue projections, or if they want to know the product development details, and you have numbers to convey that on production or something, have the numbers prepared in a way that's visual, but really you can describe it without that slide. You can say in 1 or 2 sentences what the message is that I'm trying to convey that these numbers reinforce. So I always emphasize what the message is and not what the numbers are.
Yeah. And again, probably going back to
the numbers are supporting what your message is.
Very important. Yeah, and also I have found, maybe I'm going in the wrong direction, but I found, going back to your principle of 3, which I thought was, to me, very clear, very memorable, and very useful, is doing the same thing, not trying to convey more than 3 things, and that the takeaway. So as you said, think about what one should be thinking about the audience, and what are they going to think when they head off to their next meeting or their next discussion, and they're going to go, well, Dana did say, and it was those elements of 3 or whatever it is that you need to be sure they took away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that they come up throughout the pitch. And this is where people get confused because they go, well, I have 12 slides. So how can I have 3 main points that means I have 12 main points? I'm like, no, because if one of your main points is that this is really the time to launch this product, that is conveyed throughout your section on problem, solution, and market.
Brilliant.
Right?
Yep.
Is that this is the time to invest in this,
right.
This situation, in this product.
Interesting.
And then if you're the next thing you have is that we have the team to do it. It's not just about the team side, it's about your plan, that you show that through your revenue plan and your business plan and your projections and your team, you are showing that you have the right team together and the plan and the process to make it work. So if you have 3 main headings, your 12 slides might be grouped to reinforce 3 main ideas.
We had a training program for one of the, I'm not going to say which one, but one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. and it was a presentations program, and it was also done in the past months, so it was on Zoom, etc., or the equivalent. And it was fascinating that the very technical audience, this was happened to be ones in the supply chain of that organization, and they were always involved in such technical detail. We did this and we did this, and it was like 50 points they would put on a slide. To your point, I don't think anyone, and they got that after the training, that no one's going to remember any of this. Now it could be a leave behind, as you just pointed out before. But if your theme in this entire presentation is remember these three things, it's probably a lot more powerful than, and then say, and by the way, those are all supported on every slide I'm going to give you. Or maybe one slide focuses on one thing.
You don't have to say it. They'll see it, right?
Right.
You say those at the beginning, and
Right.
then you really hone in on it on the first three slides on the one area, and you reinforce it on the next three slides. And they just keep being reinforced, and you come back to it at the end.
I think
so that they can remember, we have to invest now, or we have to do this now because this is the time to do it. They've put the right team together, or whatever it is, because that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember the overarching theme. And I always tell people to start first with your short pitch. Right? Start with that elevator pitch. All of that information that you've brainstormed in 5 or 6 different columns, get it down to 1 or 2 sentences. That's really hard, but if that's clear, you can then use that at the beginning of the pitch, use it when you meet people, adapt it as needed, and then prepare a 3-minute pitch. That really forces you to focus on the 3 main things that you're going to talk about, because you only have 3 minutes. It's a lot easier to add information and detail to expand a 3-minute pitch to a 10-minute than it is to shrink a 10-minute to a 3-minute.
I think it may have been Einstein that said that you need to be able to explain your idea to a 6-year-old, and that 6-year-old needs to be able to explain it to another 6-year-old. And while
then it's clear.
And then it's clear. And then it's and even if you were doing a brain stent, or you're doing something that's very technical, if you can say this does that, and then it does that, you don't need to have fired through 50 words in that pitch that you were describing, right? You could have distilled it that simply. One of the things I think I also would like you to sort of, as we wrap up, talk about tone. Because you've, sort of both modulation of how you say something, whether the sound goes up, I'm waving my hand, or whether it goes down. Because I remember that being also something, and also the pace, like I just stopped, the pace. Because then someone gets that differently than they would get me, a New Yorker, saying 20 things.
Yes, and that's where it really gets into the presentation skills training. But on the pace, it's very important to control that, no matter how nervous you are, so that the people that are listening can remember. It's very difficult, even though we all think we're good at multitasking now, but studies show that we're not. And it's difficult to listen and read, particularly if they're looking at a slide, and think at the same time. And we really want people to think about something so that it goes into their memory. So if you want them to think about a really key idea, give them a couple sentences to think about it, and then they'll remember it. But
I actually like your pause. I like your pause at the end there.
Whatever you do, though, it takes practice.
Yep.
I always say create the slides last, so that you have your ideas in order first, and then your slides reinforce your message as opposed to become your message. But the pitching and presenting are skills that require practice to improve, and a lot of people improve faster with coaching and training, particularly if you get stuck on what am I trying to say, or why is this not landing right. And look, your ideas are important. You've got some great ideas, some great business projects happening, and it's really important that however you pitch or present, that you're conveying that and being remembered.
Yeah, and going in with confidence to do that. Thank you, Dana. It was a wonderful discussion. We're going to do others of these, and really look forward to your participating on our platform as well.
Okay, thank you, Paul. This was a lot of fun. Looking forward to another chat.
So everyone, thank you very much for attending. We don't do this usually, but we are offering 50% off our platform, where you'll find people like Dana who are providing you fantastic insights into to what to do differently, how to do it better, how to enhance your skills. We're all about skill development and getting you to be more confident. There's a huge library of courses on our platform. More importantly, there's live and instructor engaging, so you can actually engage with people like Dana. Dana. I have too many friends named Dana with a D. Anyway, with Dana. Sorry about that. Um, and I just put Go 50 in. It's going to last for a short period of time, but check out the platform. There's a 5-day free as well. And see you on the next Meet the Gurus.